Weekly webcast. Today we are going to talk about OT vulnerability management once more because it's such an important topic. Before we do so, though, I want to remind you of two things. First, this whole webcast is live, so you can ask questions. Feel free to put your question in the comments and I will try to answer them at the end of the webcast. Second, if you want to learn more about our approach to OT vulnerability management, keep in mind we have a handbook out, an OT vulnerability management handbook, where we explain how to arrive at effective OT vulnerability management by following a step-by-step process that will allow you to achieve repeated results. So now let's jump into the thick of it. You may remember last week I made the point that if you don't have your Windows applications and your Windows operating systems in your OT asset inventory, you will never be able to arrive at meaningful risk reduction, because the vast majority of your vulnerabilities is associated with Windows software. So that means if that is not even showing up on your radar because your specific OT security product doesn't actually discover all those installed products, maybe also the security patches, your understanding of risk is completely off. So you will focus on problems, on vulnerabilities that might just be totally irrelevant if you see the big picture. And this is what you always should do, because risk is always about prioritization, risk mitigation. And if you only see a small portion of the overall troublemakers, then you cannot arrive at a meaningful risk reduction. Talking about risk, though, if you are frustrated with your OT vulnerability management, as most people in OT security are. So first of all, the good news is you are not alone. So just keep in mind that Michael Jackson song applies to you, because most people are frustrated in OT vulnerability management. And why is that? Very simple, because they use an approach that is bound to fail, that is bound to result in frustration. And the primal sin of that approach is to overemphasize risk and criticality. And that might be a shocker for you, because that's like the standard paradigm that everybody is using, yes, and that's the reason why you struggle to make any progress. And I can explain you why. So in that risk-based approach, the one thing that you focus on so much when you want to identify risk is your cost of consequence. And this is where the term criticality comes in. And then all those critical things, all the bad things that can happen. Just imagine what can happen if X, Y, and Z. And that is a little bit non-productive, mostly for two reasons. First of all, that risk that you consider critical, let's just talk about a hypothetical scenario. So you have identified a vulnerability in a PLC or VFD, so in some kind of automation gear. And if that vulnerability is exploited, you will face downtime. How often did you hear that in sales collateral? And that downtime might cost the company $1 million. Wow. Now, the problem with that is, if you think for a company of any reasonable size, and especially when you think of an enterprise, 1 million per pop, that's nothing. So that is not something that will gain the attention of top management. Top management and their risk managers, they do have certain criteria for things to pop up on their radar. And that could be something like 50 million or 100 million. Sorry, guys. So what you consider to be super, super critical might not be super critical for others in the company. The other flaw that we see in real life is that the majority of OT vulnerability managers and risk managers don't factor the cost of mitigation in. So that's just a technical flaw that doesn't get you anywhere. So this is particularly important for OT because in many cases the cost of mitigation is substantial. Why? Because when you want to update firmware, as an example, you need downtime. And before you even consider updating that firmware, you must test it. So that's one big difference between IT and OT. The cost of mitigation in most cases is substantial. And if you don't factor that cost in, your case is lost, because every manager worth his or her salt will tell you, well, we are reducing that risk, but for what cost? All right, so that might be several $1,000s, if not more, maybe tens of thousands of dollars. So, and that should lead you to think about alternative strategies. And this is what I'm going to present to you in this webcast. What could an alternative strategy be? And what I want to pitch to you is, what you should focus on is how you can make progress and how you can demonstrate progress, how you can make a big difference in reducing your attack surface. And let me tell you one thing, you won't be able to do that by updating the firmware in, let's just say, a dozen PLCs. That doesn't make a dent in the attack surface. So what does, you may ask then, rightfully so. And the good news is, well, this is actually easy to figure out if you use the right tools. So let's take a look at how OTbase can help you with that. What you see here is one of the several tables in the OT vulnerability management workspace. So here you see that we are in workspace and we have selected CVE. By the way, if you're an OTbase user, don't be confused. I'm already on 8.3, inventory 8.3. So this is going to be released next month. So this for you guys, this is something like a preview, and you will like it. So just please hear me out. What you see here is a list of software products that you have installed. So this is our sample database of typical software products and firmware products that you would find in an OT environment. And that list is sorted by what we call the V-score, or vulnerability score, if you will. That V-score is a accumulation for a particular software product, like this one here, accumulation of all the CVSS base scores for all its instances. So, for example, we see here this particular software product, Adobe Flash Player version 13, the ActiveX, is installed on 26 devices, and it has a V-score of 180 something. Now, the absolute number is totally irrelevant. It's not important. The interesting thing is when you put those different numbers for the different products in perspective, because then that will allow you to see how much those individual software products contribute to your attack surface. And then we have color codes here. So anything that is an application, anything that is something like a library or middleware is color coded in blue. Then we have operating systems. They're color coded in gray. And if we scroll further down, any firmware product is color coded in orange. And what we want to accomplish with that is to already give you an idea which products would probably call for your attention when it comes to making a quick win. Because when it comes to firmware, it's a given that you are going to need downtime to update the firmware. There's no way around that. And that is not true for your Windows applications. That's the huge difference. And therefore, those Windows applications are color-coded in blue, suggesting, well, maybe this is something I should focus on early on in the process, because that might be much simpler to remediate. So, for example, by updating the application to the latest version, or by uninstalling the software. How about that? if you figure out, well, actually, we don't need that Adobe Acrobat reader. Okay, we don't, and it's on one device. And if you don't need it, just deinstall it. And you will never have to worry about all those vulnerabilities again for that particular product. And so, again, let me remind you, the vast majority of vulnerabilities in a typical OT environment come from Windows software, and certainly also Windows operating systems that are not up to patch. So therefore, if you want to make a difference, this should be very high on your list. And also, by the way, because the prevalent risk that we're presently faced with is ransomware. It's not those super sophisticated Stuxnet type attacks against your PLCs, against your process. No, it's not. That's bullshit. It's about ransomware, opportunistic ransomware attacks. And those ransomware attacks will not exploit any bug in your firmware of some PLC rack that is buried deep down in a Profinet network segment or device net. So that's, if you want to make progress, this is not those PLCs, not what you want to focus on. It's about how you can quickly reduce your attack surface when you consider all that gigantic backlog that you're dragging with you. Okay, the backlog of vulnerabilities. So let's go back to our table and figure out what we can actually do with that table. So here we see all those various software products that contribute to your attack surface. And if you look at that table, you would see Adobe Flash Player. Oh, I see that a couple of times here, even on that first page. Hey, that's interesting. Also, Google Chrome. It's here, it's here, it's here. And that gives you an idea, well, wait a second. This is all, in a nutshell, one and the same product. And if I could probably just update that product or reinstall it, that would give me a lot of leverage. And now it gets even better. OTbase can also show you, oh, that's one product. Okay, so that is what we call the normalized view in this table. So presently we are looking at the full-blown detailed view, but now we click on normalized view. And then all of a sudden the table changes, and you would find your Google Chrome up here. And in this view, now it's not about any specific version, because from a remediation perspective, you could argue, well, who cares? If I have identified Google Chrome, or just your favorite web browser, it could also be Firefox, it could be Microsoft Edge. If you have identified this particular product, whatever version, contributes heavily to my attack surface, then what you would want to do is you want to update that product or deinstall it if possible. Okay, so you could turn that into an easy remediation task and then really make a big difference. And how big that difference is can even be visualized, because we have this new tree map feature in here. So when I build that tree map, guess what it visualizes my attack surface for this particular environment. So if you do it in your installation, it would show different products. So this is not something overall. This is only about products that you have installed, because who cares about anything else, right? So this is not a theoretical exercise, it's a practical exercise. This is your specific attack surface with all those known vulnerabilities. And in this tree map, you see the various software products normalized, and you can see how much they contribute to your attack surface. And let's just look at a couple of examples. So here we see, well, Windows 7, that's the biggest one. And that is not a surprise. Who would be surprised about that? In OT environments, you see lots of Windows 7 installations still, because it's not easy to update those because of all the applications that are installed on that system. Some applications might not even be available for newer operating system versions, and so on and so on. You have been there, you have done that. And for this reason, why it's because it's difficult, the operating system is color-coded in gray. But then there is that other stuff that shows up in blue, and that gives us a hint, well, those are good candidates for quick wins. And especially if you look at that Google box again, well, that's substantial. And the other interesting thing that we see is, guess what? We're talking about 63 devices. And just to give you an idea, the total population in our sample database here is roughly 5,000 devices, with a high number of automation gear, so PLCs, RTUs, drives, etc. But Google Chrome on 63 devices makes for a huge part of the attack surface. So isn't that interesting? That tells us if we would just update Google Chrome on those 63 devices, certainly OTbase tells you right away where they are, you would make a substantial reduction of your attack surface, and also something that you can report easily. Let's look at other examples. Adobe Flash Player. And if you have followed our webcasts, etc., you know that is a nasty son of a bitch when it comes to vulnerabilities. So you want to, best case, you want to deinstall it. And also, just look at the size of that box. It's substantial. And we're talking about 54 devices. And I would bet on most, if not any of those devices, Flash Player isn't even needed. We are talking about OT. So tell me an OT application that relies on Adobe Flash Player. If you find one, I mean, you should have a serious conversation with the vendor of that software product, because Adobe Flash Player is just a nightmare when it comes to vulnerabilities. Then we have Adobe Reader. We have Microsoft SQL Server. Oh, that's 194 devices. Yeah, that's a little bit more difficult to remediate. Then what have you got here? Siemens WinCC. So obviously an older version of Siemens WinCC on 80 devices. So that might be a little bit more difficult to remediate, because you need to do much more testing when you want to update Siemens WinCC, and you might also need downtime. But you will most definitely not need downtime for updating your Chrome browsers. And just another one here, Firefox. Guess what? So we have Firefox running on a couple of devices. Update your Firefox, update your Edge, whatever. So again, the neat thing about this functionality is now you can see where remediation makes a big difference and where it might be easy to achieve. Because if you look at those orange boxes here, you know right away, oh, that's going to be difficult. That's going to be costly, because if you update your Siemens CP343, you need downtime. If you update anything in a Rockwell rack, you need downtime. So, and you can see that right away. Probably save those for later, but anything in blue could be something that should be high on your list. And what does this tell us in the big line of events? That tells us that, I mean, if you think back, how many times have you heard about prioritization? How many times was it absolutely clear, oh, you got to look at the criticality and the risk? Well, maybe not, or not only at the criticality and the risk. What I am telling you is also look at your remediation options. And this is what we call that, what we call like the a way to being more efficient. This is performance-based OT vulnerability management. It makes you more efficient in reducing your attack surface. Why not prioritize performance? What is your problem? Why always being fixated on and obsessed about criticality? How often did you hear the term criticality and it really didn't help you to make a difference? Because again, if you fix any of those small orange boxes in the lower right corner, you have achieved nothing for the big picture. So, what, in my opinion, that whole prioritization science needs to be reviewed, because the one thing that we lack in OT vulnerability management is performance. It's efficiency. And if you want to change that, all your criticality bullshit doesn't help. You're not going to get more budget or management buy-in with your criticality bullshit. You have seen that, you have been there. But you have a good chance of getting their attention by being able to show results, that you can make a difference, that you can improve. Yeah, you can reduce the attack surface. And especially where it counts most these days, which is getting rid of all those vulnerabilities that are exploited by ransomware. Ransomware does not attack your PLCs. It does not attack your I/O cards or your VFDs. It attacks your Windows PCs. And I've shown you an easy way how to visualize that space, that particular part of your attack surface, that you then can start reducing. And you will see that progress, and your management will also see that progress. So that is what we call performance-based OT vulnerability management, or performance-based OT security, if you will. It's aiming at improvements that you can show, and not on some fantasizing about how critical something is, when everybody knows cyber physical attacks, substantial cyber physical attacks, so they happen once in a blue moon. And that's at the end of the day, that's then the problem with when you go to management, they don't take you serious, right? Because they don't see that as an actual risk. But what they do want to see, well, they want to see that the OT security team improves when it comes to protection, when it comes to reducing the attack surface. And this is what I've shown you, how you can accomplish that. Okay, that's what I wanted to talk about today. We will go back to OT vulnerability management topics every now and then, because it's so super important. Let me remind you once more that you can download some collateral from our website. In the resources page, you will find that OT vulnerability management handbook that will give you a couple of additional ideas how you can arrive at a systematic and repeatable OT vulnerability management process. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you next week, same place, same time. Bye-bye.